That's from our facilities team, so they appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Today is another edition of Southern Jewish Voices. Is this loud enough for everyone? Of Southern Jewish Voices. And today we are meeting with Sally and Richard Friedman. Southern Jewish Voices is in its 4th season. And we just got additional funding from the Birmingham Jewish Federation and Foundation to continue into a 5th season in the fall. So be on the lookout for that. We're really excited. Margaret Norman isn't here today. Today it is me, Zoe Wheel. I'm the Director of Special Projects at the JEC. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. Again, we have Richard and Sally. And I wanted to first ask about your parents and where your family comes from. So tell me a little bit about your parents and where you come from.
So my mother was from Nashville. My dad was born in Athens, Alabama, and Alan Engel's mother, Reva, fixed them up on a blind date for the Alabama-Vanderbilt game. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. So they got married in 1938 and moved to Birmingham, and I was lucky to have them as parents.
And what about their parents?
So my grandfather on my father's side was from Lithuania, and he was the first. He had an older sister who came to Alabama because his older sister was here, but she died when he was on his way to Alabama from New York. And he brought over his, I think it was 8 siblings. And it's a good thing because their whole village was wiped out by their friends and neighbors during World War II. And then my grandmother, I have a grandmother who was born in America. She was born in Elgin, Illinois, but she was also from Lithuania. And my mother's parents, my grandfather was from Poland, and my grandmother was from Kiev. And they met in Nashville and got married, and I have related to half of the Jews in Tennessee, which is my badge of honor.
Great. And Richard, tell us about yours.
So my grandparents, my father's parents were both came from Poland. My mother's father came from Russia, and my mother's mother was born in America. I grew up in East Paterson, New Jersey. My father went into business with his family. They were in the textile business. He met my mother when he was in the Army serving near Baltimore. She's from Baltimore and moved to New Jersey, and that's where I was raised. My father spent his entire life in New Jersey, with the exception of World War II, and one other noteworthy exception, he went to the University of Alabama.
And he met someone at the University of Alabama, didn't he?
Yes, interesting side note. My son-in-law, Brett Chesson, his grandfather was a rabbi in Tuscaloosa when my dad was a student in Tuscaloosa. And it was his grandfather who, along with Stan Bloom, a name you know, or Stan Bloom's father, I guess, started Hillel. And one of the reasons they started Hillel, as I read about it, was because there were these guys from the Northeast, Jewish guys from the Northeast, who were just roaming the campus and up to no good, and they had to find a place for him. So it's quite likely that my daughter Leora's grandfather and her husband Brett's grandfather would have crossed paths at the University of Alabama in the 1930s.
I love that. And one other thing that I wanted to ask you, Richard, because I thought it was interesting when you brought it up, Sally mentioned a lot of her family left before the Holocaust, even though the town was devastated. And you recently found out your relatives. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, my grandfather was born in Lodz, Poland. So was my grandmother. And they each came from large families. My grandfather had 12 siblings, and my grandmother had 6 siblings. My grandparents left Poland around 1910 and came to America. The rest of the family stayed, and with the exception of 1 or 2 cousins they were able to identify, all those who were alive at the time that Hitler came to power were murdered in the Holocaust. And we kind of knew this among the brothers. I have 2 brothers, my cousins. And during COVID, we decided to collectively embark on a project where we wrote a book about our family's history, and we hired a genealogist who had a specialty in Eastern European Jewry. And we had always estimated that maybe 60 to 70 of our extended family were killed in the Holocaust. She came back with a number that absolutely astonished us, and her research showed that it was probably closer to 350, which is just something that the group in our generation still can't quite get our arms around.
Yeah, that's hard to comprehend. Both of you growing up, Sally in Tennessee and Richard in New Jersey, what kind of role did Judaism play in your home?
I actually grew up here. Yeah. So my family was very committed to the Jewish community and living a Jewish life. Like, we did Shabbat every Friday night. We went to Temple. Temple at that point was at 8 o'clock. We went every Friday night. My grandmother and my father may have snored through it, but we were there. And that was an important message. My mom was volunteered for everything. In fact, the precursor to the Federation, Birmingham Jewish Federation, at that time was the United Jewish Fund, and she volunteered 4 days a week. Played canasta on that fifth day, but every other day she was there full time, as was my Aunt Mitzi Ahrens, and they were very involved in the Jewish community, and like I said, lots of other organizations. I was one of the lucky ones who, my parents believed in philanthropy and talked about it and how important it was to give what you could give. And in fact, my mother would, this was before consignment stores, she would take all of her clothes, and she had 2 ladies she'd sell them all to, and she would give that extra money to the Federation because she felt like it was so important. And as I got to be an adult and became aware of what happened in our business, I found out that they gave 10% of what the profits from the business to the Federation, in addition to everything else. So I feel so lucky that I didn't have to learn philanthropy on my own. And our dinner table conversation every night, we talked about Jewish stuff all the time. We talked about civil rights and whatever, but our family was very Jewish centric, and it was just central to our lives, to everything. All my friends were Jewish. All my parents' friends were Jewish. So it was really central to us.
Well, I grew up, as I say, in northern New Jersey, which is heavily Jewish, though our particular municipality was not. But nonetheless, it was an environment where Judaism and Jewish were kind of in the air. Certainly we observed the holidays, Passover Seder, Bar Mitzvah, but we were not regular Shabbat attendees. And my mother was a bit of a citizen activist, which really created for me one of my most formative Jewish experiences. There was an incident in our town, our small town, in 1967 where my mother would attend school board meetings. She was very engaged in civic life, and she noticed that on the front doors of our public high school there were very overt religious Christmas decorations. Jesus, the manger, the 3 wise men, very explicitly Christian religious. So at the school board meeting that night, she stood up and made a very well-reasoned presentation to the school board saying that she understands these were done by students, they're beautiful, but perhaps they would be more appropriately displayed in one of the art showcases inside the school rather than on the front windows of a public high school. And the board recessed to go down and look at the front of the school, and they agreed with her and took them down. Well, the next day, the major paper in our region had a big headline that said, "School and Madonna must part." And it was all about my mother and what happened at the Board of Education. And it ignited a firestorm that drew national attention that went on for a number of weeks. My mother received the most vicious hate mail that you can possibly imagine. People typing swastikas with the little X's on the old-fashioned typewriters, saying, "Where is Hitler now that we need him?" I hope you rot in hell, you Jew bitch. It was pretty intense, and I was already at college. This was my first year at college. I came home for winter break, where all this is just reaching a crescendo. I arrive at the front of my house, and there are 2 armed policemen on my front steps. And I go in, and my mother's crying. And I just, I have a general idea of what's going on, but not the particulars. And she told me that she just got a phone call, and it said, I hope you have Hanukkah candles, you Jew bitch. We're going to shoot them out tonight. And CBS came to our house and did a story with my mother sitting in the living room. So it was very intense, very real. But there were 2 takeaways from that experience that shaped the rest of my life. Number 1, it taught me the importance of Jewish organizations and Jewish organizational power, because there was no real structure of that in that town, and she basically was acting alone and had no wraparound support, which really at some level planted in me the importance of having strong Jewish organizations and how critical that is to our collective power and our collective influence. And the other thing is, as a journalist, my career went on into journalist, I saw how just a headline, a slight turn, could unleash a monster of a story through the media that could create lasting and damaging harm to people and to a community. And it just reinforced to me, I believe at some level, I was already taking journalism classes, the importance of responsible journalism. So when I look back on my Jewish upbringing, my mother stands as a hero to me. And that's the formative Jewish experience that was catalyzed by a negative, but it led to a lot of positives in my life.
And we'll go on to talk about your career as a reporter in the Jewish professional world. Before we move on, though, I wanted to ask Sally, and Richard, you had mentioned that maybe there were a few, random anti-Semitic encounters that you had growing up. Sally, how about you? You went to Mountain Brook. You were the first graduate class at Mountain Brook High School?
Second, but we were the first class to go all the way through Mountain Brook High School. And I don't know whether I was oblivious, because in talking, I have close friends that I'm still friends with as children, including Hal Abrams' daughter, Candy, is one of my close friends. I don't know whether I was oblivious or just, it didn't happen to me, but I guess my sort of education on anti-Semitism, my father felt real strongly about anti-Semitism. I mean, his mother did, but he had experienced it firsthand. In World War II, he had done his training in Texas, and he went with one other Jewish man from Birmingham, and apparently he experienced tremendous from his fellow soldiers and the commanders in his division, horrible anti-Semitism, and then he got sent to Europe, which of course it was right there. So he, and I kind of would roll my eyes a little bit, and of course now I wish I'm thinking I'm sorry. He believed that anti-Semitism was, and he talked about this a lot, that it was right under the surface and it was going to come back, and I better be on my toes and be aware of it. And I can't tell you how many times over the last 3 years I thought, I'm sorry I rolled my eyes at you, because sadly you were right. And he felt like, and this is why they believe so much in, one of the reasons in supporting Jewish organizations is because he really felt like we got to be ready. It's coming. I don't know when it's coming, but it's there under the surface. And, as I said, sadly, it's true. So although I didn't have any experiences personally, I mean, maybe some minor things like, oh, I didn't know you were Jewish. And remember when I first started working, somebody said, you don't have a big nose, but stuff. But I guess it was so much a part of my consciousness because of my father's really, I don't want to say paranoia, his belief that we had to be ready.
I like that when we talked, you said it gave you a radar for anti-Semitism. I think all of us know someone who had been impacted. I'm thinking my grandfather would say the same thing to me. We're going to move forward a little bit into college, early adulthood. So tell me, where did you go to college, and what was the transition like for you?
So I went to University of Maryland. My sister, who's almost 13 years older than me, had gone there, and I guess I just lazy thinking, thought, oh, good. You know, that sounds like a good school. It wasn't like you would go now and look at 12 different places. I mean, just, you know, Maryland sounded good. Okay. I read about it. It sounded fine. I could get in. So I went to Maryland, and it was really interesting. My first real one-on-one anti-Semitism experience happened with my first roommate. I was the first Jew she had ever met. She was from Eastern Shore, Maryland. And she was not happy about having me as a roommate and made that clear. So that lasted about a month. So, you know, I was happy to see her go, and she was really happy to move out. So I joined a Jewish sorority. I was involved in Jewish activities on campus. Hillel was not very strong when I was there. And you know, I think Hillel, thank goodness, has come into its own in the last few years. But as I said, I was in a Jewish sorority. I participated in Jewish things, like, you know, one of my high points is, for me, was picketing the Soviet ambassador's house when the whole Soviet Jewry thing came. So, you know, I was destined to have to do things later. So, but I still stay in touch with a lot of my college friends, and I had Jewish and non-Jewish friends, but my closest family at college were the Jewish women that I was in sorority with.
I went to American University in Washington, D.C., loved every minute I was there. It was a Methodist school that was 60% Jewish, and it was the most Jewish of Jewish atmospheres I'd ever been in, and it was a great experience. Then I went to the University of Maryland for graduate school, which again, a very vibrant and robust Jewish campus, and this was in the late 60s. It was a heady time to be in college, as some of you know. Being in Washington was amazing. And from a Jewish perspective, there was a period of a great awakening, because it was in the immediate aftermath of the Six-Day War. And I have nothing but wonderful memories of every single day of my years at American University and the University of Maryland. And that really affected me Jewish as well. It was the first time I had really been living in a larger day-to-day Jewish ambiance and Jewish culture than compared to where I had grown up.
And I want to bring up the 60s, the Six-Day War. You both kind of flagged that as this kind of increase in Jewish identity or awakening, or maybe in Sally's case, just a deepening. So let's talk about that era. All the rights movements are going on, Israel and the Six-Day War, how that kind of affected you.
So I was in high school for the '67 war, and I was telling our granddaughter Lila this on a walk last week. For those of you who are too young to remember, in the lead up to the '67 war, we didn't know if Israel was going to survive. I mean, the Arab armies were amassing on the border, on Israel's border. We are going to push the Jews into the sea. I mean, we really thought it could be the end. And you know, the Third Jewish Commonwealth, it was brief and beautiful, and it's going to be gone. And it was really frightening. And I remember, because there was no CNN, and you know, so listening to the war on the radio in my backyard in June of 1967, and to have one day think, is Israel going to be pushed off the map? And then the next day to find out that the Israeli army wiped out the Egyptian Air Force, had crossed the Sinai. I can't, for those of you who are not alive, you can't imagine how cataclysmic it was to think that our people were going to be gone one day, and then the next day it was like a miraculous war, that they wiped out the Syrian army. They wiped out, you know, they captured, you know, the Golan Heights and the Sinai. And to be listening on the radio when they say that for the first time in 3,000 years, Jews are at the Western Wall and have and it's our country. I mean, I get choked up when I think about it, and I would recommend all of you, there's some tapings, and you can read the translation of when they announce, you know, we're at the wall, and the Temple Mount is ours. I mean, you just can't imagine to have known, to have been born right after the Holocaust, so that was so much in our psyche, and then to really believe that we were on the brink, and then it was miraculous. I mean, that's the only word, and so, like, for me, you know, it's like I went to my parents, I said, for graduation, I want to go to Israel. That's, you know, and so I went after my freshman year. I said, that's what I want for my graduation present, that's it, nothing else.
Well, the Six-Day War, for me, I was a senior in high school, and all of a sudden, we started, our high school was maybe 10% Jewish, and the Jewish students, particularly the guys that we all hang around together, we just started to stand taller and feel this sense of pride. And we didn't quite understand every nuance, but we understood that something extraordinary had happened, something contrary to the Jewish history that we had inherited, born in the immediate aftermath of the Holocaust. I was born in *49. I grew up in this family where the Holocaust was just in the air. And everything that Sally said, and then it sparked an interest in me to learn more. And probably that was really the initial catalyst for me to try and reach into this history and understand Israel. What is this about? And it was a very exciting and transformative time. And others in my generation, I'm sure you're sitting there and can relate exactly to this. Hal Abrams talks about, and I believe he talked about in his interview, about having the opportunity to go to Israel, I think shortly after the Six-Day War, and the impact it had on Hal and his generation. It was, it's almost hard to imagine how extraordinary this Sally used the word cataclysmic event was, and how it's continued to reverberate, I think, in profound ways. I see Gary nodding his head with our generation.
That's great. I think you guys, even those of us not there, I think you did a really good job of explaining what it felt like. Moving into out of college, how did you two meet?
We met on February 18th, a Jewish number, 1974. And I'm looking at Hal and Donald, who I think will appreciate this. I walked into a clothing store on Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C., Britches, and this lovely young lady comes up and says, "Can I help you?" And my first words to my wife to come was, "Just looking." So she was good. She walked away. "Well, let me know if I can help you." Well, she came back, and we got to talking, and she sold me 2 suits, 2 shirts, and a tie. And which is far more money than I'd ever spent in my entire life on anything. I think it totaled $469, and I was like shocked. I had to like pay half then and half. So we got to talking. One thing led to another. We had a mutual friend. I called Sally. We started dating, and
Can I say one thing?
no.
Yeah. He saved the receipt and got it framed for our 25th anniversary. Best present ever.
And it hangs in our dining room, and you two guys can fight over it when we're done.
Thanks for that. So, Richard, you were in D.C. working on the Hill. And Sally, can you tell us, how did you get around to that store?
Well, so I was in grad school getting my master's in English, and in the course of a year, I lost 2 close friends in a plane crash in the Everglades. The woman who had helped raise me died of a stroke. We found out, I got pneumonia, and we found out my mother had colon cancer. And it was just, you know, I was like, I can't sit anymore and talk about the witch scenes in Macbeth. That's just beyond me right now. So I said, I'll see if I can find a job and just till I figure out what to do next. And so fortuitously, I got a job because when they were interviewing and I talked about my family had been in retail, we owned a chain of stores. Thank goodness the people at Britches never saw one of those stores, with our 69-cent ladies' panties. But nonetheless, I got the job in that, so while I was trying to figure out my life, my life happened.
Yeah, kismet. And then you two met and got married, and it was about a year since you met and got married. I would love for you to retell your engagement story.
Sure. Well, the reference to the stores, before I go into that, when I say I should have looked at them, yeah, I heard 35 stores, and I said, man, I am on Easy Street. Okay? But I was picturing 35 of your stores. I should have taken a look at their stores. But it all worked out. So, the engagement story. Well, our relationship took hold. It was clear it was becoming increasingly serious. And we wanted to get engaged. And I said to Sally, I'd like to buy you a ring. And she said, okay, let me think about that. I said, sure. And I told her, this is pertinent to the story, I told her I had about $500. It's really all I had. Maybe I had $1,000 to my name. And I wanted to do, whatever she would like. And she said, okay, let me think about it. So she came back a couple days later, and she said, I've thought about it. And she said, instead of buying me a ring, I'd like you to donate that money to the Birmingham Jewish Federation. It's a true story. I said, what? She said, that would be more meaningful to me than just having a piece of jewelry. She said, this organization is so important to me. Let me tell you about it. And I said, okay. And it took me a little while to digest that. The biggest charitable gift I had made in my life up until that time was $5 that I gave to my fraternity's fundraiser, I think, for leukemia. And I said, okay. And then as I digested it, two things really took hold. I said, this is an extraordinary person that I've met. I've never encountered anyone who thinks like that or cares like that. And this must be an extraordinary organization. I know nothing about it, but I trust her. So I sent the $500 to the Birmingham Jewish Federation, and I got this beautiful letter back from Clara Davis. Some of you will remember, she's Billy Lapidus's grandmother. She's deceased. But she was one of the people who ran a very small Federation office. She wrote me this letter that I still have. She said, Dear Richard, today was a red letter day at the Birmingham Jewish Federation. Your check arrived. We're so grateful. Your wife comes from such a wonderful family. I hope I have the chance to meet you one day and tell you more about the Birmingham Jewish Federation. True story.
Anything you want to add to the engagement story? Love that story. So walk us through, we have a lot of hints dropped that we're relating. Walk us through, how did you decide to come back to Birmingham and make Birmingham your home together?
So Richard was working on the Hill, and his position was done away with, and he decided he wanted to go back. I mean, you can't tell this, go back to journalism. But the great part of the story for me is that he decided to look for jobs in journalism, and my mother, as I said, was related to all kinds of places in Tennessee. So Richard and my mother took a road trip, and she was already sick with colon cancer, but she was doing a little better after chemotherapy, and so they had this road trip, which so meaningful for me that he got to do that, and she ended up liking him a lot better than she liked me. So.
And on the road trip?
Well, meeting Sally was the luckiest day of my life for two reasons. Three reasons. Number one, the lifelong adventure we've had together. Number 2 is those 2 guys sitting there. And number 3, it brought me to Birmingham. I never could have imagined the life and the opportunities and the friends we've made and being part of a community that brought me to Birmingham. So on the great mother-in-law tour, which was a blessing, I loved her so much, I wound up getting a job in Knoxville, Tennessee, with the Knoxville News Sentinel. I was there just 3 or 4 months, and I got a call from the Birmingham News. And they said, would you be interested in coming here? We have a job for you. And at that point, the Knoxville paper had actually offered me a great opportunity. I was going to become their Nashville correspondent, which is a dream job for a kid 27 or 28 years old. But she heard Mama calling, and by then I had drunken the Kool-Aid. I fell in love with this community from visiting, and we decided to come to Birmingham, which again was probably the best career decision I ever made because of all the things that it led to, and that's how we wound up in Birmingham.
And keep going for me to how your career paths, both of you, led to director positions at, I would say 2 Birmingham Jewish, but really 3, since you were director of both the JCC and the Federation.
I'll be real quick and let
Yeah.
Sally tell her story. So I worked at the Birmingham News. I was a reporter and editor. I loved every minute. It was a great gig. I got to cover amazing stories, but I also started to become involved as a volunteer with the Federation. Sally and I were young leadership chairs. We led a young leadership mission to Israel. I got to know amazing people. Emil Hess, Donald's father, his mom, certainly Hal, others of that generation. Just extraordinary people. Rabbi Grafman, who had such a transformative effect on my life, that the person who held that job as executive director of the Federation was retiring. One thing led to another. I had expressed an interest. The Federation eventually said, okay, let's have a conversation. The offer was made, and I kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the person who convinced me to take the job is sitting right there, Hal Abrams. I was really torn. I went over to their house one night and talked to Hal and Judy, and I remember the single moment when I said, I'm going to do this. It was Judy and Hal were sitting across from me, and Hal said something. I have chills because I think about it all the time. He said, Richard, if you are willing to take this chance, opportunities will open up to you that you can't even imagine. And I sat there looking at Hal and Judy. I said, I'm going to have the opportunity to be associated with people like this. I said, I don't know where it's going to lead me, but I'm going to say yes. And the reason that I wound up as director of the Jewish Federation is a number of people, of course, but Hal was that catalyst. So I'm eternally grateful for him. It's a joy to just sit here and be able to recount this story for him, which I've done before, but looking right here at him.
So I was working in our family business, which was stores in little country towns. And we survived Kmart, but when Walmart came into these little towns, that was all she wrote. So we liquidated the business, and I had a new baby. Sammy was a year old, and was a very active 1-year-old. And so, I was just trying to figure out what to do. And so Harry Bear and Harold Apolinsky, bless their memory, came to talk to me, and because I had been very involved as a volunteer. I'd been young leadership chair, and I'd been done fundraising and all that. And they came to talk to me, and I said, I believe in the mission certainly, but all that legal and tax stuff, I don't know if I want to do that. And Seymour Marcus, after he retired from the Federation, was briefly director of the foundation, and I think it's very complicated, and I think, it was just not really what he wanted to do. So when they came to talk to me, I said, the legal stuff, that all sounds so boring to me. I mean, let me think about it. And, I decided, I do this as my avocation. I might as well make it my vocation. I might as well have all parts of my life aligned. And so, I said, yeah, I was doing it part-time because I had a little baby. And, interestingly, the stuff I thought, man, I don't want to do that. And I mean, I love, to me, learning about the legal stuff and all that, to me, was fascinating. I mean, I had no idea, as an English major, that sounded so to me. But, I ended up loving it. And, I feel so lucky that I took the chance and said yes. And, I feel like I'm a really fortunate person because just like stuff falls in my lap, and I'm just really grateful. This job fell in my lap and they asked me to do it, and I thought, and then yes, and like one of the best, other than marrying Richard, probably the best decision of my life.
And you both served in those positions for quite a while, so I'd love for you to tell us how long you served in the positions, and then we talked about, instead of the proudest achievement, that your greatest satisfaction from working there.
So, I was executive director of the Federation for 37 years. At the time of my retirement, I was the longest serving Federation director in the country. The last 3 years, I also had the opportunity to oversee the JCC. As I tell people, they say to me, do you miss it? And I say, well, it goes like this. I said, I didn't like every minute of those 37 years, but I loved every day. And I am so grateful to this community, people in this room, people who are no longer with us, for the gift they gave me to have this opportunity. My greatest satisfaction, it's really quite simple, and it's the ultimate privilege and blessing that this community gave me. I had the opportunity to work with one generation through another and into a third. And again, Hal Abrams is sitting right in front of me, and I think about the relationship, both personally and communally, I had with Hal and Judy, and the relationship I had personally and communally with his children, Jimmy and Louise of my generation, and my involvement with Sarah and Abe, and particularly Hal's grandchildren, and Sarah getting involved in a youth campaign on behalf of Israel, and watching them now emerge as major Jewish community leaders. That to me is the single greatest professional blessing I ever had, from one generation through another and into a third. And it's a gift that I think about every day.
So I did the job 4 months shy of 40 years. And, I think I would say two things like stick in my head. Number one, I got to see people at their very best. People who say, I want to do something for the future. I love this Jewish community. I love our Birmingham community. I want to do something to make life better for future generations. So I got to see the very best of people. And I don't know many jobs where you get to do that. So, that was incredible. And the other thing is, all of the really unbelievable events over the course of my career in the history of the Jewish people, like the Soviet Jews coming to Israel and America, and to be able to stand on the mall with 250,000 other people and lobby for that and to have it happen. Helping the Ethiopians get to Israel, just helping Israel come out of wars and be strong, help our Jewish community have a strong day school, a strong center, strong institutions, strong family services. I feel like I don't know what I did to get to be so lucky that that's what I got to do for a living, and that I got to have front row seats in history and got to go to incredible programs where Henry Kissinger spoke and Peter, Paul, and Mary sang. For those of you who are older, know that's a big deal. To get to meet incredible people, like to get to hang out with Debbie Friedman, the Jewish song person. I don't know how to even describe her. She revolutionized Jewish music. To get to hang out with her for a couple of days. Just opportunities I got. How did that happen? So for me, it was just such a blessing. Not, like Richard said, not every minute was great, but every day, every year was just something I feel so blessed to have been part of.
And the two of them, in the midst of this, were able to raise two children together, Sammy and Leora. We haven't forgotten about you. We're going to come back at the end and ask a question. But before that, I want to ask, coming into more present day, how would you describe your relationship with the Jewish community today? You've both retired, but what is your relationship like now?
I love this community, and I'm enjoying this season of my life where I'm a civilian and I can do things from the outside. Ike Fell at Florina, being the CEO of the Federation. Sally met Florina and her family the day they arrived in Birmingham when she was 6 years old. I hired Florina. I think it's not by happenstance that I see Leora, Sammy, my granddaughter Lila when I glance, and then I see Florina. That must be metaphorical, and I know she's very good friends with my children. And but the dilemma I faced was, to everything there is a season, and I needed to step back and step away and let the new people move forward. But I yearned to be involved in the community, and through fate, good fortune, providence, or God's blessing, Brooke Bowles, whom I didn't know at all, came up to me at a preschool Hanukkah program and said, "Hi, I'm Brooke Bowles." And she said, "You're Richard Friedman, right?" I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "You used to work here, right?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I'd really like to get to know you better." I said, "Great." She said, "No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I want to sit and talk to you, and maybe you can help me. I'm new." I said, "Okay." And that sparked a wonderful friendship that endures and has opened a path to me become meaningfully involved in the JCC as a volunteer. And I'm finding a lot of fulfillment in that. Certainly pride and enthusiasm for Brooke, her leadership, and the JCC's achievements, but the achievements of the community overall. It's a great place to be, literally and figuratively, where I am at this point in life. So I'm very grateful.
So when I retired, I thought, oh, maybe I'll learn to play mahjong. That still hasn't happened yet. So that's not exactly the Jewish community, but it's contiguous. So I've still done some volunteer things. In fact, we had Israel World Jury Bureau last night, which I just love. It's just been so near and dear to my heart. And I'm actually involved on an advisory committee for a program that works with Ethiopians in Israel, which is very near and dear to my heart. And I stay on, I'm a news junkie, but like my two papers that I read every day are Times of Israel and Jerusalem Post, because at least I trust them with what's happening in Israel, not necessarily media I would see here. But, we went to Israel in September, and because of the war, I planned and unplanned a trip 5 times. So that's kind of what have I done in retirement, planned and unplanned 5 trips to Israel. So finally got to go once. But, I miss part of it, but I have to, like Samantha and Florina, they sort of keep me plugged in what's going on, and I really appreciate that. And, I'll always find something to do in this Jewish community because it's too important to me.
And we're really grateful. Both of you have been very involved post-October 7th. Richard went on a speaking tour and still does that. You guys have sponsored programs at the J, films, talked about your Israel trip, so we're very thankful for your continued involvement. Okay, we're on our last question. So going back to raising a family, unlike many parents, you guys in the community, you sent your kids to out-of-state college, and they came back and they raised their families here. So enlighten us. Tell us how. What was important in raising your children? How did Judaism play in that? And are there any secrets parents in the room may want to know to getting your kids to come back to Birmingham and plant roots by you?
Probably ought to ask them, but I'll give you my perspective. Yes, obviously it was very important to raise our kids Jewish. Our hope was that they would live Jewish lives, raise Jewish families, educate their children Jewishly and live the kind of life that we thought was of tremendous fulfillment, enrichment, value, and that we felt incumbent as parents to do all that we can to pass on that to our kids and give them the opportunity. But the pivotal moment for me came when Sammy was getting ready to leave the day school and go into Mountain Brook Junior High. And I probably was doing what I do best, and that was overthinking it. But I wanted to know how to ensure that as he goes into that Mountain Brook secular system, that he still feels committed, confident, comfortable as a Jewish kid here in Birmingham, and will grow Jewishly, raise a Jewish family, have Jewish children, et cetera, et cetera. So Sally and I invited Howard and Suzanne Bierman to dinner one night, because we said, look at Howard and Suzanne. They have 4 great kids, all living fulfilled Jewish lives, meaningful Jewish family lives, and that they seem to have a wonderfully vibrant, connected, multi-generational Jewish family. And Suzanne, those of you who know her can be pretty much cut to the chase at times. She just looked up and she said, it goes like this. She said, say what you mean and mean what you say. And she said, Richard, our kids are woven into our family very closely. We have an orbit, she said, and it's a Jewish orbit. It's a Jewish orbit 24/7. And they know if they want to secure their place within that orbit going forward, they'll always be our kids and we'll love them no matter what. But if they want to be integrated in the family dynamic, it's going to be a Jewish orbit. And those things really stuck with me. Now, in terms of going away and coming back, well, it was very important to us that our kids go away to college, to be exposed to other parts of the country, other cultures, other ethnic groups. And part of my calculation was that it might motivate them to come back and appreciate more of what they had here. We were blessed. They met wonderful spouses early. Brett's from Cincinnati. Sammy's wife, Emily, is from New Orleans. And they seem to like Birmingham. They seem to like us. If not, they do a good. And all 4 of our kids, fortunately, were able to secure meaningful employment opportunities. So it all came together. So, but at the end of the day, a large part of it is just luck and the roll of the dice.
So when we were raising the kids, what was so very important to me was Jewish joy. That, yes, they need to know about the Holocaust and the horrible things that have happened to us, but that's not the reason to be Jewish. The reason to be Jewish is the good stuff, the joy. And I'm absolutely convinced that Jewish camp is just so critical, since both of my kids are married to Jacob's camp boyfriend and girlfriend. But, to just make it joyful for them. Like, we had Shabbat every night and Friday night, and it was like, if you want to do something, like, I'm sorry to very observant, but we'll do Shabbat at 4:30, but you are going to be here for Shabbat. You can go do something afterwards, but you are going to be here. You're welcome to invite any of your friends. Anybody can come along. But that's what we're doing, and we wanted, and we've continued that with our grandchildren. When the kids moved back here, we said, every Friday night you're invited. You don't feel like you have to, and I would say 90%, 95% of the Shabbats we're together. I feel like, years ago the saying, we don't keep Shabbat, Shabbat keeps us. I mean, I believe that's true. And, I think in the lab work that we did, I think that's the case. And, we just, our Shabbat's dinners are chaotic. Lila can attest to that. There's somebody crawling under the table or whatever, but not Lila. very much a young lady, but others are crawling under the table. But they're crawling under that Shabbat table. And so we feel like that's a life message that we pass on to generations, that there's so much joy in being Jewish.
Thank you, Sally and Richard, for sitting down and talking with us today. We're really grateful for you and the community.
Thank you.